Okay, great. So let's kick it off.
Hey, yeah, well, been a while, hasn't it? So it's Aldo and Mike, Free the Hunter. Um, we've had a bit of a break. Both of us been busy and just, I don't know, me getting distracted, which is probably one of the things.
Well, on my side, I don't even have time to be distracted. It's just like, there's things like now I have, we spoke about this before. Now I have a job and a full-time job, and it's just,
Ooh.
how those jobs could be? They can just, it's no longer full-time, but it's more like dominates your life sometimes, or it could dominate
Yes.
your life. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm definitely, I have that imbalance. I'm not going to allow myself to be, for a job to actually dominate, my day, my week, my life. So I have that imbalance, but still, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'm still not working. Dare I say it, enjoying not working.
Yeah.
Uh, but looking to rebuild, which is cool, which is all part of what we're doing here as well. Um,
But even though you're not working though, but I understand you're taking some courses, right? So
yeah. So it was just like revisiting how I want to go forward in life. Because after last summer, when I had the whole on the life accelerator, was when all of this happened. When had this maybe realization that I may be ADHD. We had the relationships module going on, and the sort of the things we were being asked to do at that stage. About remember that one about finding two people who you think have wronged you,
right.
and to forgive them, and finding two people who you have wronged and to ask for forgiveness. And I really struggled with that because I don't like assigning blame, and I think it's too easy to suggest that one person wrongs another,
Mm-hmm.
and generally there's a deeper story going on.
Right.
But it was at that time as well, with Lisa's daughter going through various assessments and stuff like that, that I explored the ADHD thing again, and I was listening to Numb by Linkin Park.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the lyrics of that song, I was listening to it and I just broke down and I started flinging things around the room. And then I shot the video, which I posted on the Life Accelerator, but I used that to go to the two people, or the relationships that I felt were troubled the most with me, and said maybe this is a way of understanding why our relationships have gone the way they have gone,
Right.
rather than suggesting you did this, I did that, forgiveness. It was actually to say, well, look, from what I've read so far about ADHD, I may be more emotionally sensitive to stuff. Yes, I go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. I'm not consistent. I can see how that would really piss you off. But likewise, where you might be a bit dry with your humor, I can take that totally the way it wasn't intended. But you don't seem to be aware of that, how upset I actually get, and all of these different things that are coming out of what potentially being ADHD might be, and that actually paved the way to start rebuilding those relationships, or at least get over the initial breakdown which
Right.
had happened. So,
Well, it's funny that you say that because I was thinking today, in the sense that there was the link that you shared with me, and the main thing is like anyone that is that. All right, so anyone that has it, and especially if they're already an adult, right, and they don't
mm-hmm.
realize they have it, and all of a sudden like things are happening or not happening in their life, or the things that are happening are not good things, and then all of a sudden they meet someone or they get introduced to certain concepts, maybe in a course that it might resonate with them, and then it might kick off this search, right? Like, oh, maybe
Yeah,
kind of like what happened with you, and then that begins like another part of their life journey, right? And then all of a sudden, like,
yes,
okay, now I can see potentially I may or may not have this, and then all of a sudden, like now I'm going to learn how to manage it, right? And that takes time to actually go through that, but there's no mechanism out there, at least that I know, and I'm pretty sure there are many that you can actually have relatively an informal conversation about quality, but having a quality conversation about a certain topics, and then maybe introduce that to many people, like some type of course that we can actually potentially put together, and then maybe they can find other Mike Pauls.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I've talked to so many people since, and it's quite funny meeting people at college, talking to. I met a few other midwives who are friends of Lisa, my current partner, and they were talking. One of them was talking about her partner and how he felt that he couldn't go forward because he thought she wanted to get married and he wasn't ready to commit. And she was saying, I've never asked him to get married and stuff like that. And stuff. I don't know what's going on in his head. And I knew exactly what was going on in his head, even though I'd never met him, just from what she'd said, was because he was making up these stories in his head, possibly from things she'd said, but he was making them real in his head. And he was feeling an emotional intensity that she couldn't grasp because she wasn't inside his head. But then, of course, everything she did or whatever reinforced his feelings, and it all starts blowing out of control. And I started saying things, well, this happened with me and my wife, and I said this, that, and then she'd go, wow, that's exactly what my partner says. It's like, and you start seeing these recurring patterns. And this, I just think it's like I've said this before, ADHD is more a personality type than a disorder. And we're on this spectrum of different things. And when you're tired and irritable, you'll be more ADHD-like than not ADHD-like. There are people who know when to do the important things, the I should do this because if I don't, I'm going to get fined, or I'm going to do this, that, or the other. The ADHD trait for that is, bugger it, I'm going to do what's interesting for me now, which can often obviously create a lot of issues. But the flip side of that is that if you're always doing what's important or what you perceive is important, then you're missing out on living in the now as well. And that's maybe, you mentioned about the job. Sometimes we can get so wrapped up in the importance of our job or something like that we actually neglect our family, we neglect our health, we do all sorts of things.
No, I agree. I completely agree. I mean, look, I got some things that I needed to do this weekend, and then as I'm doing these things, I'm like, wait a minute, here I am going again to my old way, right?
Yeah.
But then I do stop, and then I say, okay, and then here's the family time, and then we do it. But then I'm recognizing it, that I go back to the way, the way I've lived for many years, and to unlearn those things. It's one thing, but then to recognize that there's an issue, and then like you can stop yourself at the moment. I think that's actually powerful enough, at least for me. That gets me back into the now, like relatively quick.
Yeah. But like, if we go back to where we were just before we started recording, and you said, I think rightly so, that we need to start recording, was this idea that both you and I work in health and fitness, yet we both acknowledge that we don't do the things that we know as much as we should, and often way less than we should.
Right.
Why is that? We know these things, and this is something I've known for a long time. When I've been working in health and fitness, knowing is not enough.
Right. That is 100%.
It's like, 100%. and then you'll say, well, obviously you need to do the stuff, but why don't we do the stuff when we know it? And I think that's part of where, I think Free the Hunter can become a bit wider than just ADHD and stuff, because it is understanding our evolutionary makeup. For those of us that believe in the evolutionary development of man, I don't want to get into a big philosophical discussion about that, but everything that's got me through my cancer and understanding health and well-being and looking at ADHD, Free the Hunter side of things, is looking at an evolutionary basis as how might we have operated 20,000 years ago? What's different then? You know, I mean, I think from the evolutionary point of view, evolutionary biology will say that, yes, as human beings, we were pretty done and dusted design-wise 20,000 years ago. And that took several 100,000 years to get to that.
Right.
I think as humans, we've been around 200,000 or something like that. Someone will correct me along the line, but
that's what, you know, I follow ancient civilizations. 200,000
yeah,
the number.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The last 20,000 years, we have made incredible, almost exponential progress, and I think we're almost on that vertical line, right, in terms of what humans can do. But it's been about changing the environment we operate in, and not about changing ourselves.
Right.
So if you think back to, well, you know, not think back, but if you can imagine 20,000 years ago, you may be living in a tribal grouping of 50 to 100 people. You'll have a few square miles of territory that you've secured for yourself. You hunt, you walk, but once you've got your food, you maybe sit, you maybe tell stories, you maybe gaze at the stars. Yeah, it's a fairly basic life, but no one's telling you what you have to do. There is just the necessity of life and being in the now.
Well, you know, now you mentioned that gazing in the stars aspect. And that gazing of the stars, you know, it's knowing, kind of like you have that awareness, because that's one of the things I read, is that at that time, the people, like, that's all they had to watch, right? You look up at nighttime and you see the stars. It's a show that's on for like 12 hours, right? And you're looking at things and you study it and you wonder, like, right? So you have that sense of wondering of, you know, your sense of purpose in this world, on this earth, with what you have in place, which is your family, and you're looking up. And so then your mindset is very different compared to today. We don't see the sky, right? It's the weather, right? And even at nighttime, there's so much light pollution that in the end, you lose that connection between yourself and the universe in however way you want to interpret it. But and then therefore, then, you know, we kind of are just existing in this mindset and this box, and we're doing the same thing. So it's a completely different way of thinking compared to how people lived many years ago.
Yeah, very much so. And I think there's a key word you said there. We've lost that connection, key phrase, to the universe. And I think also in a large way, we've lost a connection to each other. We live in a society that encourages individual aspirations based around wealth and status.
Right.
Sometimes around skill. You know, when you look at sports people, musicians and stuff like that, but predominantly about, even that is still around the status that you gain as being an Olympic gold medalist,
right,
or whatever. And that creates, and also this idea of a meritocracy. It sounds, I used to intuitively think, oh yeah, that's great, meritocracy is great, but a meritocracy has to be founded on equality of opportunity. And it's become very clear to me with the work I did with Matt on coaching children and the different effects you can have just from what month of the year you're born in, whether you had older brothers or sisters, etc. The equality of opportunity isn't really there. And therefore then to have a system based on meritocracy, where someone's starting the 400 meters race, but they're 100 meters behind already, is a little bit harsh. But those are the systems we perpetuate. And America and Britain are two of the worst countries in the world, or they're like two of the biggest proponents of that system. You know, work hard, achieve, and you will get your greatness and your reward. For me, it creates a sort of divide and conquer attitude, because it sets individuals against each other. You might see this working merchant banks where you've been, competition for management posts, higher posts, bonuses, all of this sort of stuff. You see it in schools, you see it. I mean, and I'm not saying competition is bad per se. Just this is like a broader philosophical discussion on how our society may currently make some of these things worse. And for ADHD, this is a big issue for people with those types of behavioural traits, because we don't conform to that consistent drive for achievement.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Our conversations, I think, in general, and everything I think we've both been experiencing, especially as a, and I do look at it. I do give credit to the Life Accelerator program in a sense. Like, I'm back in the environment. I'm back in the jungle of that meritocracy. But in reality, I'm just doing the job because I like it, as opposed to, I don't have that mindset that I need to win. I need to make myself look better than you. If anything, I have this mindset, which is, and it's being recognized, that I want what's best for the firm. I want what's best for us to be in a better. So that different type of mindset. But the other people that have been there for many years, and I've been part of that, so I understand their mindset. They're in there to like tear people up, right? And like, you know, oh well, you know, you got to do this, and it's like, I'm like, look, you know, so I don't have that drive to be the number one person, right? The other people do, and then therefore they approach things very differently. So meanwhile, like, I'm laughing at people. I'm like, it's like, why are you even going? I'm not even your competition, because I'm not even competing with you. You don't understand. So if you want to waste your energy trying to quote unquote win, it's not going to work on me, because I'm good. And just by that attitude, my approach to problem solving is different. My mindset is different, and it's like, I feel like I'm going to win anyway as a result, because it's just different. It's easier. You know, when you go after something and you don't have to go after it, it's just, you make certain actions, you get along with people, you develop relationships with people, not because of the benefit that they're going to bring to you, but it's much more because you just want to do the right thing for them. And if I do the right thing for them, I get the benefit overall. It's just a different mindset. It's kind of like what we're doing here, right? You know, I'm not trying to, you know, when we have a collaborative effort, and we're doing this because in the end, we feel like it's going to serve a lot of people. It's going to serve in a positive way. And this is why we're doing it. So that collaborative approach is all has to do with kind of like what we were discussing before about having a sense of purpose, connecting with the universe, connecting with others. Because once you connect with the universe and you're aware where you are, then when you meet another human being, it's like, I like that person. You know, I can connect with him. I can connect with her. You know, we are all connected. We recognize that the quality of our conversations just goes up many levels up. And then therefore you develop those relationships. I think anyone that has, you know, ADHD or tendencies, you know, if they become part of that connection, I think they'll gain overall. You know, it's as opposed to just going on social media and spending, you know, hours and getting nothing out of it, right? You know, you being out of listening into some concepts and some different ideas about, you know, just about quality of life. So.
Yeah, definitely. And that interesting what you said about the ADHD people sort of learn to make that connection and stuff. And I think it's it goes back to, I think there's some of the stuff that we talked about on a podcast or two ago, and it's like the interest-based nervous system versus the importance-based nervous system, and how we can get those two connecting. Because I think the crux of ADHD as we see it is the important based nervous system, which seems to be the majority of people, the neurotypicals, if for want of another label, is their lack of connection, both ways, lack of connection between people who live their life based on importance and those who live their life based on interest.
Right.
And there's like a breakdown in communication.
Right.
Because we are individuals and we have this drive from somewhere where most of us are conditioned into it, certainly in Western society, to achieve, to get career, to get wealth, bring up your family, set them off good college degrees, good careers, again, repeat the cycle.
The rat race.
You called it that. I've been out of it for a long time. But yes, yeah, the rat race, the good old-fashioned rat race. The ADHD person, bizarrely, often can do very well in that rat race, but not in the conventional way. But they're often the CEO person, who consistently wants to try new things, break rules, not do the same thing day in, day out. But they also are the people who can suffer really badly at the other end. So they're the ones who end up, a higher proportion of the population is ADHD in the prison population, for instance. In general population, 5%, possibly. In the prison population, 20+%. In the drug addict population, again, 20+%. So there's something about the characteristics of the ADHD person that doesn't suit today's environment.
Right.
And now, is it something wrong with the person? Is it something wrong with the environment? What do we do about it? That, for me, is what's up for grabs. But the way I got sold it initially was it's something wrong with the person.
Right.
Which I found very disheartening.
Right.
But revisiting it over time, I found different perspectives on it and found some very, very encouraging perspectives. But that made me think about it in different ways. Like, why do we see it as, the ADHD person as disruptive? They sit in school, and they don't sit in school. They mess around.
Yeah.
They break the rules. And that person's seen as disruptive, and there's got to be something wrong with them, but they're seen that way by a certain part of society.
Right.
The one that believes that children should sit in school all day long. Now, not every culture on this planet believes that kids should sit in school all day long. And even in our own, even like in the US, in Britain, there's lots and lots of debate and lots of different types of schools, private schools, that actually go against that model of state education. So I think we have to recognize this, the state model, the mass education model has its role, has its place, but it's very, I think, deficient in being able to optimize each individual.
Yeah.
I
mean, even here in the States, you have the public schools with their limited budgets, and they continue to cut back budgets on schools. But what they're cutting out is things like music, art, gym.
Yeah. And well, to all of those people out there who believe that the STEM subjects, science, technology, I don't know what the ESA, engineering and mathematics, these are the things that seem to be getting pushed a lot here with technical colleges and all this type of things. Like, imagine a world without pictures, without film, without music, without books, without poetry, without songwriting. Where would we be?
Right.
It's like, next time you watch television, well, you wouldn't have television without the arts. Yes, you need science and engineering and technology, but the point is television and film and cinema and the music industry only exist with the arts as well. There's no point in having it otherwise. Even if you watch something factual like David Attenborough's Blue Planet, the photography, the artistic exposition of what they're filming, the music that gets played alongside the soundtrack as he's talking about blue whales and stuff like that, it's all there in our life. We we can't get rid of the arts. I used to sit there thinking, what the hell are the arts for?
Right.
I was at university, I did engineering, and I'd watched them all, and they're all sat in black, smoking their cigarettes and their joints,
Right.
going to 3 lectures a week, whilst I went to my 30 lectures a week. It's like, what is the point of the bloody arts? They don't make any money, this, that, and the other. Well, you know, they don't produce anything. But actually, when you look at it, I can't imagine a life without the arts. I can't imagine how dismal, how depressing, how empty that would be.
Yeah,
And
I think,
so
I mean, I used to be the same way. It's, I'm going to school and I'm like, oh, okay, the arts, right? Humanities and all these things, literature, music. And I'm thinking like, it's all business. I'm here for business. I'm not here to learn, you know, about, you know, poetry or whatever, things like that. And then, but I realized there were, you know, some college, well, some of these classes are required here, you know, in public university. And so you have no choice, you have to take them. So one of the classes that I do remember the most was my arts class, the history of art. And I remember like all the themes that were, you know, you look at a paint, well, before that class, I used to look at a painting and I'm thinking like, okay, that's worth 1.3 million, right? There's always the money part as well. But I'm like, why would someone pay for that? Like, I can do that, you know? And then not realizing, okay, well, you have to understand the person who actually painted, who the creator, the environment that we're in, what they were saying, how people interpret it, and so on. They were actually, you know, some badasses, right? You know, that you know, at that time, and they had a message, and that message was coming through in their paintings, and all of a sudden you start realizing, oh, it's not just paint, it's not just you know, it's not just colors, it's not just a frame. There's much more to it. It means something. It means a lot more than that, and it has to do with the human condition. It could be human nature. It could be, you know, that connection with the universe that painter was trying to express through to the masses, you know, through this form of expression. And that's actually for me, oh, it's just another form of expression. Okay, then I start looking at art, music, and I'm like, oh, now I realize what's going on here. So it could be, you know, that, yeah, you do need that part. You know, there's these other classes as well. Those are the ones that really made me think. It really made me, you know, beyond, you know, a bond, you know, bond math, right, or stock math. It just it made me, I guess, it led to more self-discovery about these new concepts that I'm starting to. So that for me, my college education, you can't put a price on it. And I'm not saying for the certificate. I'm not. It's just much more the concepts that the institution allowed for me to be introduced to, and to this day makes up who I am. You know.
yeah.
I can't think of, oh, that finance class was like the best class ever. You know, without that finance, you know, if it wasn't for that stats class, you know, it's just yeah, it's just much more. You need the balance, but you have to recognize that balance is necessary. You know, and I don't think that aspect of how do we live our lives is ever taught. You know, in our young age.
Well, that was an interesting thing. I think that brings us nicely to the link I sent you before. I've got it here. I don't know whether I can get it on share screen on this side. Because on this Android version, it don't seem to be.
Well, I can do share screen. Let me see if I can bring it up on my side.
Yeah, it was the Max Neef. There you go. You got it up there. The Max Neef stuff.
Oh, here it is. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. Can you if you go down to the graphic, the this thing there, and if you click on that, it'll go full page.
Yep.
That to me brings us nicely into what we're talking about. You've heard, we all know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or many people do. I don't know actually. Wait, can you Maslow's? Can you, on the next tab? Can you open up the tab to get Maslow's hierarchy of needs up?
Okay.
I just click on that. That'll be. So Maslow suggested that there was a set of needs that we would need to satisfy to keep us going. And at the bottom of the tree there, you got your physiological needs: air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, the need to reproduce. And that's like real human beings at their basics. And then you go up and you've got your security, and in modern society, things like employment, your money, health, that side of things, somewhere to live. Going up, love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, a sense of connection, which we mentioned.
Yep.
Self-esteem, so respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom, and then self-actualization, desire to become the best that you can be.
Right.
So this has been like fairly standard way of understanding human needs. And the idea being, I'm not sure whether Maslow actually put it in a hierarchy first off. I read that someone else did this afterwards, but the suggestion was that you can't go on to your safety needs, for instance, until your basic physiological needs have been met, et cetera, et cetera. So you can only really get up the pyramid by satisfying the level you're on. That, I think, if you look at some of those, you think, well, actually, you know, surely you can have friendship and loving relationships, even though you might not have a job.
Right.
For instance. So I think other commentators would look at this and say that actually some of these needs that don't necessarily need to be satisfied before you can do others. There are some obvious ones where you might think that's true. So like the need for air, for instance.
Right.
You need air before to allow you to keep anything else. Tom Hartman, who was the guy who came up with the hunter-farmer theory of ADHD, which is basically where I'm following that line of thinking. He suggested in Maslow's hierarchy of needs that there was something else, because what all of these theoretical models are aimed to try and predict future behavior. And if it doesn't predict future behavior, then the model needs tweaking in some way.
Oh, so they were looking to use this as maybe it's both. It's one is to understand the needs.
One is to understand. Yes, obviously to understand behavior, but then how can we predict it, and how can we? So, for instance, if you would Maslow's hierarchy of needs is probably taught quite often on business courses in terms of motivational behavior.
Right.
So how do you get people to do what you want them to do? And there were lots of things there. There was McGregor's theory X and theory Y, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Hetzberg's hygiene theories, all sorts of motivational things. But yes, you're right, to understand behavior. So what Tom Hartman said was actually Maslow's hierarchy of needs doesn't predict or doesn't explain risky behavior.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So lots of people do things which is potentially harmful to themselves. And that doesn't fit within Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
So Tom Hartman suggested a need which he called a need to know that you're alive. And this can sort of be looked at in the way he described it, was that we've got all of these stimuli into our body through smell, touch, sense, sight, sound, all of these things. But there are times when we're just absolutely thoroughly bored, and nothing that's coming to us can stimulate us to do anything.
Right.
And he's suggesting that when we're in that sort of state, we're lacking, we've not met the threshold to know that we're alive or that living is worthwhile.
Right.
Maybe another way of putting it. And what he's suggesting is that if you were to have a y-axis, so if you imagine on this tree up here, on this pyramid that we're seeing, that neurotypical people, their threshold to know they're alive would be very low. So it's very easy to meet. So if you imagine a child in the classroom, he's listening to the teacher, or he or she's listening to the teacher, and they think, yeah, this is interesting, great, blah, 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 and they're able to comply with everything. And physiologically, we know that that's maybe aided by the production of dopamine in the body, which gives us that short-term focus to be able to do things. But there may be another child in that room whose threshold is far higher. So they have to receive far more stimulus to actually know that they're alive or that life is worth living. Mm-hmm. And that's the child who's sitting there and the teacher's droning on. Maybe some of you think I'm droning on now and you're phasing out. And so you do something different. And the child in this classroom would maybe throw a rubber at somebody, right, or flick the girl in front of him. Yeah. Because what happens is the ensuing drama, the girl saying, don't do that, the teacher telling him off, etc., gives enough stimulus for him to come into the real world and know that it's worth being alive.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
Unfortunately, in today's society, what that child is doing, it works for them in a sort of way, but we might consider it maladaptive in that actually in the long term, it's not beneficial for that child to keep doing that. Right. Interestingly, Tom Hartman talks about, well, what are the time frames? So someone with a lower threshold, when they get over that threshold, they may stay there for a length of time. And it could be anything from minutes to hours to days, weeks, even years and decades. And so you get the person who can stay in the same job for 40 years, right, and be happy doing that. Yes. But you get at the sort of sharp end of the ADHD behavioral traits, you get the kid who can maybe stay there for a few minutes. So he's flicked the girl in front of him, he's got told off, he's with it for a while, but then he drops below that threshold again where he knows he's alive. Right. And so he does something again. Mm. And this time he has to do something more. So maybe he doesn't just flick the girl, he actually pulls her hair, or he kicks the chair legs away from her, or whatever. And he keeps going through that. And Tom Hartman suggested that we all have this need to know we're alive. And the majority of us, well, we have lots of different time frames on which that is the case. He says for him, yeah, he changes business. He starts a new business every sort of like 6 or 7 years because he just gets to the stage where he gets bored with what he's doing. Right. So he no longer actually talks about ADHD as such. That's not his main bent, but it used to be. So that need to know your life was something like an addition that he suggested for Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which would start explaining risky behavior. If you can flick over to Max Neef's thing now. Okay. Max Neef talked about a much more complex, but maybe more realistic view of fundamental human needs. And if you look at the far left-hand column in white, where he talks about fundamental human needs, so there's a column going down: subsistence, protection, affection, understanding, participation, leisure, creation, identity, freedom. And then across the top, he's got, again, listed as fundamental human needs, but being needs, which he calls qualities, having needs, doing needs, and interacting needs. And the intersections of all of those are the sort of things that we need in place to do all of that sort of stuff. So for instance, you've got subsistence and you've got having things: food, shelter, work. You've got to have food, you've got to have shelter, you've got to have work to provide subsistence for you. Right. But also in the being column, you need to be physically and mentally healthy as well to be subsisting well, for instance. You also probably want to be interacting well with people and stuff like that. So there's a whole list of things which make it more flexible, more complex initially to look at, but then actually you can see how we can have all of these different things or bits and pieces of them. But I want to take you back to the point you made about we're not teaching this stuff in school.
Right.
About education. What I think in the article that this graphic came from, they talk about our education system only emphasizes a few of these fundamental human needs, and they tend to start emphasizing from the having column.
Right. I see that.
So they sort of miss out the being column.
Yeah.
And we focus on having food, shelter, work, on social security, on having friendships, on having books and things like that, on having responsibilities, and then the doing and the interacting. But the problem with a lot of that is that without the foundation of the being qualities, that a lot of those things don't work very well. So a lot of our human relationships, for instance, if you don't have respect, sense of humor, generosity, sensuality, care, imagination, tranquility, spontaneity, all of these different things, relationships don't work as well. And the early years are when our values are set. And we talked about, we're having that discussion about the arts versus the science, technology, engineering subjects. Well, we're taught very early on that our values are that we need these things, these are productive, these can make money. Career is important, status is important. But if you look down that being column,
yeah,
how much of that is talked about in early education? Right. And indeed, how many parents would talk or encourage those things in their child and stuff like that? So it's Max Neeford's, basically his premise is that in the ideal society, everyone can fulfill their own needs, their own fundamental human needs, without harming themselves or others, which is, we go back to that, what I said, like that divide and conquer, the meritocracy, competition, etc., doesn't have that as a value.
Yes.
We're often like, we're taught business is a dog eat dog world. If you can put your competitor out of business, or just the very fact implicitly, if you gain market share, you're taking market share from somebody else. So you are intrinsically doing them or implicitly doing them harm. So we have a value system which makes it very difficult for just life in general. From my point of view, for the ADHD child, makes it even more harder, because we understand, I don't know, for me it's like these values don't fit right. I never felt right growing up about things, and you see with artists and musicians and stuff like that, many of them are ADHD. You look at business leaders like Richard Branson, a lot of CEOs along that model are people who, the current way of doing things is wrong or is lacking or whatever, and they challenge.
So what is the ADHD? So the way, what is it that they have? Is it that they have much more of a being qualities when we're looking at this graph here?
I would, possibly. I think that's maybe where they're at. They're much more. It's about what's right in the moment for them.
Mm-hmm. Right, because if they have that mindset, like in the being qualities part, I can actually see that it's like, okay, that's where they're at. Imagination, right? sensible, and they're thinking of other things. Their mindset is there compared to the traditional approach in the sense that having things, right? They're trying to get the better, or the actions, right? It just like those are polar, two different poles of thought, and maybe that is a way of understanding, like, oh, look, if you have ADHD, and I hate using that label, but you're much more, on the being quality side, and as a result, once you understand where you're at and where you need to be successful, at least in this environment, then from there they can start like managing their way, throughout life. That's
Yeah, and you'll find with, as in with all people. I mean, I don't think ADHD or that personality type doesn't make you any better or any worse than anyone else. But I just think, unfortunately, you're operating in an environment which is optimized for something else,
right. Yeah.
other than your makeup. Unfortunately, it comes across as judgment from some aspects of society, not all. But that's what you're going to have to learn to deal with. Or, for me, it was a big understanding. Well, okay, if that is me, it explains an awful lot. And where I was lacking self-confidence and self-esteem because of all the things that people said about me in the past, it was actually, well, okay, it's because we don't understand each other.
Right.
I don't understand you, you don't understand me, but now I have a better understanding, and I can understand why you would say those things. I can understand why I would feel the way I did. I can look at the world around me and think, oh, okay, I can see how this world doesn't fit me. So why my dad's wish for me to choose a career and to study hard and all of these types of things, which were really well intentioned, and that was how he was brought up, how that didn't fit with me, because my personality, my makeup couldn't look 40 years ahead to think, oh wow, yeah, I can work 40 years and potentially not enjoy myself to get that reward of retirement and all of this type of thing.
I'm thinking like about everything that you're saying now, in the sense that I'm looking at myself personally, and I just read this article not so long ago about midlife crisis, right? That's another.
All right, yeah.
So, I mean, personally, and you know this already, I've been in the finance industry for many years, and all of a sudden, it's just like one day, and a lot of people were surprised. I said, I've had enough, right? I want out. I'm completely disengaged, and I'm like, I want nothing to do it. And I think, for me personally, and maybe this is what they call midlife crisis, in the sense that I spent so much time in the second column of having things, and just, and then all of a sudden it's like, I wanted something completely different, and then I take time off, and I go into the being qualities column overall. And I spent more time on that. So it looks like in my life, I actually took some time, about a year, to just get back into the balance and spending more time on the being column. I'm wondering whether midlife crisis has anything to do with that. I'm wondering whether all this talk about ADHD, whether that has some implications on what I just said. Well, I think we lost Paul. Like Paul. So I'll just keep talking for now. Let's see if we can just dial back in. So overall, personally, it's everything that I'm learning here from a personal level. I think this conversation would help many in terms of understanding not just ADHD, but understanding themselves. I'm of the opinion, and I'll wait for Mike Paul to get back in there. There you go. You just lost.
Am I back? Yeah, I've been fiddling around here.
Yeah.
I was trying to get the picture of you back, but I can't.
Can you see the screen? Can you see the?
I can see the screen. I've got Max Neef up in front of me.
The main thing I was just saying is that I'm wondering whether so myself, I actually left my job and everything, and I took a time off, and I took time off because it seems I had this need, and I didn't realize this until I actually looked at this, to be much more in the first column. That was actually kind of like my drive overall, it seems to me. And because I got a lot of it, Then when I was ready and I felt right back in balance, I went back into kind of like the way I was living my life before, but in a different mindset as well. I'm wondering with this whole midlife crisis, that people label, right, this change, whether this has anything to do with it. And it could be, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think midlife crisis for me ties in very much to similarities to the issues that like an ADHD person might suffer. Is that actually the ADHD person, I think, is far more sensitive to their environment,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore when it doesn't fit them, they kick off. The neurotypical person can make do with what they do. They can have the stiff upper lip, whatever, they can work through, plow through, and they can go through this, and they can do what they have been told they should do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great strength as well. But for me, midlife crisis is the ADHD coming out in the neurotypical person, or as in it's your humanity coming out. Because at the end of the day, there was a quote I read somewhere. It was like, it was on an ADD ADHD seminar, and it was actually saying, think about, we get told to have these to-do lists the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to remember we're actually human beings and not human doings.
Right. Well, I remember when you were talking about there was like a bunch of people like completely against the to-do list, and meanwhile, like, but I like to do this. That's actually how I get things done, and that's actually
Yeah,
how can someone not have a list. How are they gonna actually get anything done if they don't have a list of
yeah,
things to do? In my mind,
yeah.
right? I get
And
it.
yeah, but it's the balance of all of these things, and that's the thing is like, yeah, to-do lists help me as well. That being said, um, I had a big to-do list for my life, which never happened in the way that I had hoped or had originally hoped, because of the way I've been brought up and conditioned.
Yeah.
But also, when we have this to-do list, we can lose sight of being,
Mm-hmm.
which is potentially where your midlife crisis comes in.
The list of tasks, the task bar.
Yeah, um, and this is the conundrum, isn't it? It's like there's no one right or wrong way, and every individual is going to have their way forward.
Yeah.
And I think for me, is much as I'd like to, or in the past I've wanted to think my way is the best way, I should be able to go out there and tell everyone how to live their life and they'll all be happy and healthy. That ain't going to happen.
Right.
But the point is if you're not happy and you don't understand it, there's stuff going on, you don't feel right, you don't necessarily agree with the philosophy, maybe you haven't thought about it that deeply, but it's just like stuff ain't right for you. You can look at this Max Neef stuff. You can look at the things like the Free the Hunter type stuff. You can look at, there's a book I'm reading, if I got it here, no, ADD Myth, which talks about the behavioral traits as intensities, but she looks at the positives and the negatives, but works on the positives, because there is a lot of research to show that actually working on our strengths is better than working on our weaknesses.
Right.
In terms of overall development. And that's maybe something we can discuss in the next podcast, because I'd like to go into that in a bit more detail, because traditional ADHD treatment is about trying to deal with the weaknesses, the supposed inattention. Well, let's make them more attentive, let's give them a drug.
Yeah.
That type of approach. But I think what this article was saying, that this graphics from, was actually, if we start from an individual perspective, individual family perspective, if we start implementing the things in the being column first at an early age, where children's values are set, and essentially our life value system and beliefs come from those very early years, the having, the doing, and the interacting will all follow on far more naturally and in a far, I don't know, nicer, more fulfilling way. I'm guessing is what I'm trying to
No, I
say.
mean, so one thing well, two things I'm getting out of this is like what you're is that like I kind of look at the label of ADHD. I want to like eliminate that, right? It'd be great to do that, but I think
Yeah, big red cross.
because it's just another way of being, or it's just another way of thought or mindset. Maybe I'm not
Yeah,
correctly, but the main thing is just like understanding that that's just another part of who we are, and for some people, for some young kids, they're stronger in that, right? And then there's some other
yeah,
kids that are stronger in the column two part, and that it's a balance. And then throughout life, we're going to be going through both views of the world, or
yeah,
both mindsets,
yeah,
both ways of being. Maybe I'll just call it two philosophies, right? But what is like
yeah,
one approach or way of living, or this philosophy that we traditionally are used to. If you have that, you're good. But if you have the other one, you're not good. And then as a result, what happens? Then, we identify those kids, put them in a bucket, and then we treat them differently. We talk to them differently. We reward them or punish them differently, how they want to.
yeah,
And then we even give them drugs for the way they are, right? Rather than it's
yeah,
just not understanding. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is the way I'm looking at things now, and for what I'm learning from you and all our conversations is that, it's part of being successful. Like we all want to be happy, right? So if we are all living, especially as we get older, in column two, and then we're trying to like figure out how come I'm not happy. I have my house, I have this, I have money in the bank, but I'm not happy. And it turns out, well, if you start hanging out with more ADHD people, you'll be fine. You'll be happy. Maybe
I'm not sure that's the case.
if you hang out with ADHD people, you'll realize that your conversation is going to be different. You're going to be doing different things. You're going to get different perspectives in life. And then as a result, it's going to actually help you. So it could be another form of, how to be happy, hang out with ADHD.
ADHD therapy, yeah. It's like, yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because
or some course, it's like,
yeah, I think there is definitely
uh-huh.
definitely a case for allowing people or showing people different perspectives, different philosophies. I mean, some people, one friend of mine who's a parent, he wanted to know how to deal with his child. And this is a grown-up child now. The child's 21, but it's like he won't tidy his room. It's unacceptable, the state of his bedroom, and he won't phone his grandmother to say happy birthday or whatever, and it's left to me to do, and that's just not acceptable. Right. And he wanted to know exactly what to do, and I can't give that answer. I don't think we can give that answer through this exploration. But for me, the issue with drugs is that there's a paradigm that we live in now. There's a way of understanding our world, and there are people who agree with what goes on, and for them that's fine, and they get on and do it. And there are people who disagree with the way things go on, and they don't. And depending on who's in power, and this is at every level, from government and above government down to teacher, parent, child.
Right.
Yeah, that all of these conflicts can go on at all of those multiple levels. The child who gets on with it at school is deemed to be the child who is the good child. But what happens when 40 years down the line, they're in the career, they've probably got thickening of the arteries, they're close to heart attack, they feel empty because they've got the house, they've got the wife, they've got the kids, the big car and that, but somehow they're still not feeling what was there. The child who sat in school and implicitly knows, can't explain it, can't rationalize it, it's just, but knows I shouldn't be here, this isn't right for me, but he gets told off for it, and he gets labeled, and he's maybe lacking adaptability because he can't adapt to the current system, and that's going to be a weakness for him or her. But it's getting that balance right to actually say to this child and that adult and that adult, that actually we evolved and we were successful as human beings because we could collaborate with each other. And actually, I need a bit of that person who can do the important things, who can put off the need for instant reward and gratification to get done what they need to do. But likewise, that person probably needs a bit of me to be able to think outside of the box and to be able to handle, get into a high stress situation without panicking because of health and safety and this, that, and the other, and the massive stuff coming in, because that's where I come alive. Right. And I can deal with it dead calmly. You know, the fireman who can run into a raging fire, as opposed to the accountant who can look after the books for the fire station and ensure that the fire station runs financially efficiently. Yeah. You know, the fire service needs both of those people.
That's right.
And it's just actually learning that, okay, this type of child, currently our state education system is not fit for all types of children. That's the very basic conclusion that I come to for why ADHD children suffer so much. It's because of the expectations on them. They're not fit the type of person they are. Can we do something about that? I'm sure we can. Finland are looking at changing their education system to do away with the curriculum full stop, and to have more life-based, project-based learning. You know, let's start a cafe and learn finance, cooking, science around running a cafe, right? Which I think is amazing. Yeah, we have to revisit, what is education for? I think we also have to revisit our own personal values and beliefs.
Correct.
Because those personal values and beliefs are what cause all our personal conflicts, because we create our expectations of life on our own personal values and belief. So if it's your belief that a child should be able to sit in school, and it's your value that education, the current education, is really strong, and it's, you know, it will prepare your child for a good job, a good career, he'll be able to support their family and all that sort of stuff, then you will get really pissed off when your kid doesn't want to do that. You'll be very happy if your kid does want to do it. Yeah. So, you know, and this was part of the conflict, a massive part of the conflict for me and my father, my dad. His expectation of how I should behave and operate and turn out, and what would he believe would be best for me.
Right.
And as a child, my total inability to deal with that. Yeah. Now we have a better understanding, and we can talk to it and almost laugh about it. I don't think Dad's quite at the laughing stage just yet, but there's an understanding. An uncle, my dad's brother, said this, because in India it's very much we teach the middle classes, like, you know, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an accountant, become an engineer. Those are all revered professions in India. And one of my cousins went into marketing, and she married a pop star. And like the family going, oh my God, what's happened?
Right.
Yeah, one of our own has married into the arts industry. Yeah. What is that? What do we do? You know, it's like, and I had a little joke with my uncle about this afterwards, and he said, well, the thing is, we're like frogs. We were like frogs in the deep well. We could only see what was inside our well, and we couldn't see what was outside the well. So that's why we only ever said, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. So it was really interesting for me to try and understand where my parents have come from in that sense. It's like, you know, the world has changed dramatically from when our parents were parents, and there were limited options, and it was very much, you just get on and do it. But we know so much more now. But we're still, I know, a little bit backward in things. We still have a fairly standard set of values, or the way certainly the way our education system is run.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are lots of, there's, I mean, you go and look at Ken Robinson, Cigar Tomitra, there are hundreds of educationalists who are challenging this, and there are hundreds of parents challenging it. You know, why is my kid at 8 years old having to do homework?
Yeah, with my little one, he's 5 years old, and he's going to school, and I think I told you he's part of the Gifted and Talented program, and they stress academics pretty strong there, and things like that, and we definitely appreciate that part. At the same time, my wife, she puts Sebastian in different classes outside of the educational system. A lot of tutoring classes, STEM, those are like science and science and math and things like that. But they do other like soccer, they do swimming, they play chess, they play all these things, right? It's just like fun stuff, right? Like maybe 20 years ago, I would have thought that those classes were not good for him or for any kids, because it wasn't stressing academics. It's not going to improve their grades. But of course now, what I know now is it's just it triggers another part of the brain. This morning, he asked me, he's like, "Hey, Dad, do you want to play? You want to play with me?" And I said, "Oh, okay. What do you want to do?" And then, he didn't come back with anything. And then I guess I was doing something else. He comes back, "Dad, you want to do projects?" And I'm like, "Projects? I'm like, what is projects?" And he comes out with, a box of toothpicks and about 3 little bags of marshmallows, those little tiny marshmallows. And he starts building houses, like cubes. He uses the toothpick and puts it in his marshmallows. And they taught him that. So we're learning shapes and triangles and cubes and that. So that was another way of playing with things, simple things, and then stimulating, ideas and thoughts and things like that. And it was just amazing, like that just came out of him. And I would have never thought of that. And he's teaching me, things that I would have never been exposed to as a kid. It's interesting.
This is the other thing. It's like, what you said there. Peter Gray writes some great stuff on the evolutionary basis of play and why play is so important.
Yeah.
Again, maybe for future podcasts, because again, I think it fits in well with the ADHD neurotypical model of the world and how we want to cut down playtime and build up formal teaching time and the consequences of that. So I'm really glad that you mentioned play there, because that's it's a fundamental part of our life, which I think is going missing. But that's like I said, that's a topic for another podcast. How long have we been going?
I think we're at the hour now. I'm just thinking, like, and I know we have relatively ended, but I think we have a lot of information that we've collected, and I'm pretty sure there's more to potentially even think of something, some type of program. Some type of maybe a course or something to introduce people to these concepts. And I think we can start formalizing something. I think I have some ideas, and I'm pretty sure you have ideas too. We can and maybe incorporate that in some type of course for other people to really listen in. It's pretty interesting concepts, that I think as parents, a lot of parents have kids today. Gladys has one. They went out yesterday, and her friend has 3 kids, and they all have ADHD. And one of them is, I think, like 18 years old, and still to this day is getting therapy. And other 2 kids have it as well. The other one's like maybe 10, and then her little one is like maybe 5. And they're all labeled it. And I'm like, I just feel like it's so unfair. Knowing what I know now, there has to be a way for these kids and the parent, most important, because let's say for the parent to really understand these concepts as well, and maybe manage them differently. Maybe I'm using the wrong word, or maybe introduce them to different things. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there that are struggling, trying to understand.
Yeah, very much so. And I don't want to belittle anyone. We talk a lot about the positive aspects of ADHD, but if you're a parent who's got a child that won't do anything, but the parent wants them to, and kicks off and is maybe getting expelled from school and this, that, and the other, that's a really difficult place to be. And I don't know the solution to that yet, but there's a mix of things. It's understanding the needs, the fundamental needs of your child. What are its being needs?
Right.
how can we adapt the environment so the child can fit in better? How can we communicate with our child to make them feel like they are being listened to, as well as, that it's not just the one-way dictatorship?
Right.
Because I think that's often what happens with the children. We call it, I can't remember what the term was. It was one of these 3-letter acronyms. It was basically oppositional defiance behavior, or oppositional defiance syndrome, basically saying that kid is defiant and shouldn't be, and they're ill because of it. They have a condition. Maybe they are just that different type of person, and it's the skill set of the parents that is lacking. Not intentionally, that's not their fault, because they wouldn't have known how to get that. I mean, parenting in itself, it's like, where do you get the skill set for parenting? I mean, it's pretty much potluck, isn't it?
It is.
Did you have good parents? Did you have good role models? Do you have good friends?
For 28 years. I'm learning now. I feel like I'm in a better spot. These past 5 years. Could you imagine, as a young parent, 20 years old, we know nothing. We're still trying to understand. We don't even understand ourselves yet. We're not even developed. We haven't even formed or fully developed. And we can, however that's defined. That definition is different for everyone. So I think we have
I think
to do something. Something.
Yeah. Definitely. And whether it's a sort of high level concept based thing to start off with, and try and get it out there and see what people are interested in.
Right.
Knowing maybe we can ask the subscribers who actually watch this what they would be interested in, if any of them are actually involved with that. Funny you should say that. I was looking at Udemy the other day. They do all these online courses and stuff, and there's actually a program on there to help you develop your own course and stuff like that. So I was actually thinking that might be somewhere to go and practice. And
well, I mean, I don't know. I think I told you I've also had this mentorship course as well. It's laid out. It's all about execution now, and I'm going to engage with the team that agreed to move forward on this. I think in there, this is like an important topic, at least kind of like high level, maybe 20-30 minutes, and discussing some of the concepts. Planting the seed there. So because any parent of any young adult, might realize, oh, wait a minute, my kid has that. I've been dealing with my kid, and doing good. He or she is doing good in school and everything, and I want him to succeed. But let me understand a little bit more about that, and being part of that course, can actually introduce the concepts as well. So I think there'll be some major benefits there overall.
Well, I also think as well, on along those lines, if you're going back to the Life Accelerator course, I mean, Norman's ADHD. He's been officially diagnosed in Germany, and he came up to me, after a lot of the stuff I'd said, and came and told me that. But he's like a self-development guru. He reads everything on self-development. I read everything on self-development that I can, and then certainly in health and well-being and stuff like that. And what I think you'll find is a lot of ADHD people, whether they know it or not, are on things like the Life Accelerator.
Interesting.
Because they are somehow feeling unfulfilled.
Right.
They're looking for ways. They're looking to find their way, but they can't do it. They're not doing it the standard way. They're not building a career in a big blue chip multinational, stuff like that. And, Brian's gonna do your podcast, this, that, and the other. It's a way of fitting people's interests, So for me, from the parent and the child aspect, but also for the adult who's like, well, I'm not finding, is that understanding yourself. Why is it you go to a course and you feel all hyped and wonderful about it, but then you come away and you lose it? And I've seen theories written about that and stuff, but I agree with those, but I think the ADHD side of it actually exacerbates or enhances that effect of that. You feel, I'm loving it when you're there.
You're engaged, fully engaged.
You're engaged with all of those people and all these different stimuli, all these wonderful ideas, but then you get back to the humdrum of everyday life. And that threshold that we were talking about, all of a sudden it's up there, and that excitement goes away, and you're back down to it, and you can't get yourself going again.
Right.
Which is why, for me, one of the things that had excited me about the Life Accelerator, and it hasn't quite followed through in that sense, was this this year-long support.
Mm-hmm.
You know, during the 6 weeks, a lot of us, you know, the majority of people engaged. We didn't all get our stuff done, but the majority of people engaged.
Yeah.
And it was great. And when we went to the graduation, it was great to see everybody. But it's almost like being at university, you need to keep it going for longer.
Yeah.
Because us ADHD folk don't have the ability to do it on our own. We need that help, that little kick up the backside, that structure to do that, which is, you know, why we're working together. Because it is one of those things, you see that something you like in it, but you're able to give me that structure that someone, oh yeah, I want to do it with someone. Oh, Aldo's willing to do it with me. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Because on my own, I do a bit and then I phase off, you know, I drift off.
Yeah.
So
you know, so it's I think it's time, it's due, you know, for that, you know, to take that. And I think, like I was saying, like, I think as adults, we kind of rely on our education in our early years, and then we start life. And I think we all still need to be educated. You know, we still need to start continuous. We stop learning, right? We just learn based on, especially in today's world, what we read, what we see, what we hear, and then that's it. But we don't really like engage. We're like, oh, you know what? Let me learn these new concepts. Let me go back to school. It doesn't have to be finance. It doesn't have to be, you know, budgeting. It could be other things. And I think, you know, because we stop learning, we're at risk of not growing as well. I think a course like this, and the context that I was telling you about it, I think overall is something that if somebody just engages, there'll be it's a win-win in overall. That Life Accelerator course, at least for me personally, it just planted a lot of seeds, you know. And
exactly.
You know, I'm looking back and I'm thinking about, like, wow, you know, it'd be interesting to see what our long-term goals were, that we wrote them down. So, you know, and then, right, and to see what is it that we've actually done. But one of the items that I have on there is having a new set of friends around the world. That was one of the long-term, and I have that, you know. It's just I have you, I have Remy, I have a bunch of other people that I stay connected with, and we are connected. And, you know, maybe we're not like fully engaged as you and I are, you know, on a consistent basis, but or Remy as well. But there's at least you have those connections, you know, and it's up to us. And so it facilitated that, you know, the whole Life Accelerator, or at least facilitated that. It's up to us to actually follow up, right? You know, even if you have ADHD, right, or labeled that, you know, you still have to take the action part and say, hey, let's meet up, let's talk, let's get to
definitely.
Too. So cool. With that, that's all I have on my side for today, at least.
Excellent. No, I think that's a cool place to wrap up. So we'll go away and we'll behind the scenes to start looking at a course. I think, but maybe we can put something shortish together and just kick it out there, and then see what feedback we can get.
Yeah, because and build this conversation today, if I had ADHD or kids, I would definitely say, oh, there's more to this. Let me learn more, and then trigger, you know, an action item. And if they have a group of people to trigger that action, that's even better, in my opinion.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, Aldo and Mike, Free the Hunter, episode 7? Is it? I can't remember now. I think it's 7, but hey ho. Cool. We'll see you next time.
Over and out. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.